Hello again and welcome to part 2 of the Introduction to Fire Doors. This training program has been brought to you by the BWF-Certifire Fire Doors scheme, and we're here with our scheme manager, John Fletcher. Hi John, could you please explain what we're going to learn in this section?
Yes, in this section, Tim, we're going to look at how a door's performance is measured. So we're going to look at how testing occurs and what types of doors are tested. And we're also then going to lead into certification and the different types of certification that we find with fire doors and why, in particular, third-party accreditation is important. Okay, so in this first part, we're going to look at how a door's performance is measured and lead into certification of fire doors. Before we do that, let's first of all look at some simple definitions. When we talk about fire door, we're looking specifically at a fire door leaf. That's a design that's been tested to have a certain resistance to fire, and it's the main component of the assembly. We mentioned earlier in section 1 that the ideal solution is a fire door set. That's a fire door leaf that's supplied already pre-hung in its frame with hinges, glazing, fire and smoke seals, and ironmongery, and it's applied as a complete set. What we normally find, though, in standard practice is that people buy what's called a fire door assembly. That is all the correct and compatible third-party certificated elements of a fire door set, but they've been collated together from different sources, and they're fitted together into what's called a fire door installation. So what finally complies with building regulations and British standards is a fire door installation. That could be a door set or a third-party assembly that's installed correctly. Along with that, there has to be what we call essential ironmongery. That means hinges, closers, latches, and knob sets. In the case of hinges and closers and other materials, they should be CE marked and they should be certifier approved to ensure that they are compatible with the door that's been tested. There is also what's known as non-essential ironmongery. They include things like handles, knobs, spy holes, letter plates. They're not vital to the performance of the door, but it is important that they're fitted correctly and that they are specifically fire rated in many cases. So it's important to make sure that those, even though they're not essential ironmongery, are still the correct components that should be fitted to that door. Most of that information is contained in the fire door manufacturer's information that comes with every fire door. Those doors are tested to British or European standards, and it's important to remember it's the complete design that's tested and that test is only valid for that particular assembly. So if there are various aspects of the design that vary, then they will have to have another test undertaken and certificated for that particular application. Testing is undertaken by an independent UCAS laboratory, and as we mentioned earlier, the door is tested as a complete fire door assembly. The door, the frame, the glazing, and any other components that are fitted to it are fitted very basically into a furnace, and that furnace is taken up to a certain temperature where the door cooks for a certain length of time, half an hour, 1 hour, whatever the rating requirement is. But it only relates to that particular assembly. Here's an example of a fire door performance test being undertaken, and there you can see two doors side by side for comparison purposes, basically, fitted into a test furnace. In this case, it's gone through to 44 minutes. The door on the right-hand side has burnt through, but the door on the left seems to be still intact. So when it comes to selecting or specifying a door, there are two things that you need to bear in mind. One is the door design and the door's configuration. That means how the door is going to be positioned and what its intended use is, whether, for example, it's going to be a single or a double leaf door. This slide shows different design types. In here, we can see panel doors, what are called molded panel doors, flush doors, which are those with a single skin over the top, and then glazed doors. Each of those doors will require to have a different test because it's made in different ways with different composition. The other thing to bear in mind is the door's configuration. Will that door be configured as a single leaf acting in a single direction with a single hinge? Will it be a double door or a pair of doors? And will it be acting in one direction or two directions? You often get those types of doors in corridor doors where they swing in two directions. Each of those will require a different test. That is shown on the door's fire certificate. It will have the words SA, SL, SADL, meaning single acting, single leaf, single acting, double leaf, as you can see from this slide. One thing to remember that's vital is that two single acting, single leaf doors do not add together to make a pair. In order to have a pair of doors or a double door configuration, you need to have a test evidence from the door manufacturer that shows that it can be used in that particular configuration. It's a common mistake where people will buy just two single doors and expect that they can be configured as a pair. That is not the case. The question to ask then is, will the installed door be the same as when it was tested? And the only way to ensure that that's the case is to get the fire test certificate and check that against the actual door that you've bought. Every door contains fire door fitting instructions. This is an example of a simple instructions that show the door's configuration, the style of door or the design type of door, and all the different components that should be fitted to it, whether they're hinges, locks, latches, closers. And the information will show exactly what type of components should be fitted to that door in accordance with the test evidence. We have similar instructions for the frame, and they will show how that frame has been tested with the door and how those components should be fitted to the frame, in this case hinges and intumescent seals. If you want to find information about the fire door test certificates, you can go to the Warrington Certifier website and download the information against each manufacturer.
John, just to summarize, what's the key point to remember about tested designs and configurations?
The key thing to remember is that the door that's specified should have the correct test evidence, that test evidence should be supplied by an independent UCAS laboratory, and that test evidence should relate to the door's design and the configuration that's going to be used in the building. So you must make sure that the door is correctly tested in accordance with BS 476 Part 22 and it complies with the building regulations.
And once it's installed, we can't then modify it or alter it in any way?
That's correct.
Okay. Let's move on to the next section then, John. Certification.
Okay, so what is certification? What does it tell me? There are three ways in which a manufacturer can claim that these products conform with the building regulation requirements. Those three ways are either self-declaration, by having a single certificate for that door, or by having what we call third-party accreditation. And what I'd like to do is explain what each of those means. The simplest form of providing test evidence is what we call self-declaration. In this case, it means that the manufacturer makes his own claim that the product conforms. But you've got to be careful of this because it may mean that the product may not have been tested, that it may have just been manufactured and copied somebody else's test. You should also ask the question, if it was tested, when was it tested? Was that an impartial test? What standards was it tested to? And what about ongoing product manufacture? Are they continually going to be made in that way? One of the things to look out for, the common claims that you see with this type of test evidence, is that it simply has the word complies with, or is designed to, or is tested to. And it's important to recognize that these claims are no guarantee that the products will meet the right standards or that they will continue to do so. And you should be aware that there are a growing number of products on the market that have such claims. The second way of providing evidence is to have a test certificate. This is probably the most common, where product manufacturers supply a test certificate to show that that door or that component has been tested at some time. What you've got to look for here is whether that sample is representative of what they always produced. or whether or not the test was independent or not. Will the future products that this manufacturer makes always be the same? What happens if his materials change, or his processes change, or his designs change? The certificate is only a snapshot test. It's a test of what happened at that particular moment in time on that component. The third and most reliable way of getting test evidence is by what's called third-party accreditation. In this case, an independent organisation verifies or validates that the product's test evidence is correct and that the company is regularly checked to make sure that those components comply on a regular basis. The authorities recommend this way of buying products to make sure that you've got confidence in the products that are going to be fitted correctly.
How can we be certain that it's third-party accredited?
You need to look for an independent body or a scheme that operates that's called a third-party accreditation scheme, such as the BWF-Certifire scheme. That means that members have volunteered to have their products regularly tested, but also that their manufacturing controls are audited as well. Let me show you how this works with this diagram here. This diagram shows the relationship between the manufacturer, the test house, and the third-party certification body. So a manufacturer can have his products tested at an independent test house, and the third-party accreditation body will check his products on a regular basis. The manufacturer will have a quality management system in place to make sure that he's consistently manufacturing the product correctly, and the third-party accreditation body will take a sample of that product and retest it to make sure that you can get consistent products that will comply with the test.
Okay, many thanks, John. That brings us to the end of part 2. There's just one more module to go before we finish the whole training program. John, could you please explain what we'll be discussing in part 3?
In part 3, we're going to look at the BWF-Certifire scheme and how that works in relation to what we've just been talking about on third-party accreditation. And then finally, we're going to look at the different components that make a fire door work, and as we've expressed before, why it's important that those components are compatible with the fire door and the fire door that's tested.
Thank you very much, John. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in part 3.